Welcome to Fair Bites. Fair Bites is a global nonprofit advancing AI ethics education through bite-sized content, resources, and community. I'm Mana. I take she, her pronouns, and I direct the interview series here at Fair Bites. In this series, we are highlighting experts in AI ethics and learning more about their work they're doing. In today's episode, we'll be talking to Anna Bethke. Anna is a principal data scientist focused on fair, accountable, transparent, and explainable, FATE, AI in Salesforce's ethical AI practice team, collaborating with product and research teams to create AI responsibly and empower our customers to use it responsibly. They research and implement innovative techniques for assessing and mitigating bias and harm in AI. Anna received their MS and BS in aerospace engineering from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, concentrating on human factors engineering. Anna was formerly the head of AI for social good at Intel and previously worked at Facebook, MIT Lincoln Labs, Argonne National Labs, and Lab 41. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Anna Bethke.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you today.
Thank you. So to start off, could you please tell us about your background and specifically what led you from aerospace engineering to AI ethics?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely seems like a little bit of a circuitous road, but when I have to think about it, then it started to make sense. So one of the key things I think that led me here was that human factors engineering experience. So when I was doing my aeroastro degree, I was in the human and automation laboratory. And there we were trying to figure out how can humans and computers work the best in order to complete a task. And specifically, this was for a lot of flight operations. So flying a plane is very complex. And the larger the plane, the more types of complexity there is. So you have to figure out as a designer, what should a computer do? What should a person do? When is it appropriate? When is it not? And so that gave me a huge introduction to both automated systems as well as design display statistics, because in human factors engineering, you're always doing a lot of user tests. And that gave me the jump I needed to go into data science, which I did for a lot of different companies. Mention them off very well, but there was a lot of labs in there where I was doing a lot of research. And I don't know, I guess the big jump that happened was I was doing more and more of these sort of proof of concept research types of projects, and also getting more and more into the AI for good, AI ethics space in conferences, through blogs, and just sort of seeing okay, well, what can we actually do with our technology that can help people in their day-to-day lives. And I wanted to do that more than I wanted to figure out the best sentiment analysis classifier. Because while that can be useful, it's not really going to help somebody get the water that they need to drink. Make sure that if we are using sentiment analysis is a good example of what an algorithm that has tons and tons of bias, making sure that this tech is working well for everybody. So yeah, that's sort of what happened. And I'm super happy with where I'm at today.
That's awesome. Yeah. So glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing that. And it's incredible to me how so many people start off in different areas and then just make their way towards AI ethics, because really it is, so many fields are human centric in STEM.
No, for sure. It's without a human, oh gosh, I'm sure that somebody has quoted this way better than I will say it, but it's without us, without people, these automated systems, what are they for? Because at the end of the day, everything that we're making, everything that we're trying to automate is there just to provide assistance or knowledge,
right.
So that it makes our lives quantifiably or qualitatively better in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So you mentioned that previously you were the head of AI for social good at Intel. And I'm curious to hear like what kind of projects you worked on there and what your typical week looked like.
Yeah, no, that was a really interesting job. And it's one that I created. And that was when I was like doing sentiment analysis. And I was like, wanted to do something different. So, as the head of AI for Good, I was doing sort of two different projects. One was helping nonprofit and other companies that are focused on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, and helping those organizations collaborate with groups within Intel, to help them with their technology issues. And then the other one was AI ethics. And I guess maybe I'll talk about the AI ethics a little bit. First, I was working with a whole bunch of different individuals from our policy, legal, research, et cetera, trying to figure out like what can we do as a company in order to ensure the tech we're producing is ethical. And specifically for like a hardware manufacturing company that looks a lot different than it does for like the group that I'm in now at Salesforce, because we're like a B2B. So, but then the other part of it, the working with the SDG groups, that was way more varied. So one of the projects that I loved working on was this project called Trail Guard, and basically it was the same technology that would be used in like a surveillance camera to be able to check if there's somebody going down like the alleyway where they're not supposed to go, or something like that. So these motion detector types of cameras, they can be put out into the savannah, into like the wilderness, and then be utilized by park rangers, be able to tell if the image that they're being sent because of this motion sensor is like a poacher, or if it is like just the leaves blowing, et cetera, or if it's, something that's not concerning, like it's one of their own rangers. So things like that. And I guess like my week to week, it would be, I did a lot of advocating for this type of work. So it was a lot of teaching people like, what can we do with tech? What should we not do with technology? So both the harms and the foibles of what we're creating. And then it would be working with the nonprofits to try to figure out like what are their needs, and then working across so many different organizations trying to figure out who can help. And oh my gosh, that was like way outside of my comfort zone, because like before that I was like a data science nerd, and just give me my Jupyter notebooks please, and I will be a happy person. Don't make me talk to people. And I did a lot, but it was good.
Yeah, it's so good to hear. So yeah, this Intel position was one of many that you held, right? You worked at like Facebook and Inquitel, and now you're at Salesforce. So how has and you sort of talked about this a little bit with going out of your comfort zone and doing all of this collaborating and communication, but how has your job as a data scientist sort of evolved as you've moved from each of these places to the next?
Yeah, it has in a lot of different ways. And there are some like things that always remain the same. So the biggest like constant through, I'd say, all of my jobs, even before I considered myself really a data scientist, because I'm old. And so data science wasn't really a job title at first. I'm not as old as some though. Oh gosh, that's going to come out wrong. But anyways, that's where I was going, is how knowing how to solve a problem and having the persistence to try to figure out like creative and new ways of going about it. So like if you are trying to solve a issue for, like let's say a friend or a client, or, like your business, and you're handed this issue and you're like, okay, well, like oh gosh, I'm bad with coming up with examples on the fly. But you start to figure out, okay, well, like what is the type of information that I might need for this? What could be the data sources? What would I love to have that I might not have access to? Like what data would be optimal? And you start to ask, okay, like how is this going to be used at the end of the day? And then you start to put together all these different little puzzle pieces to try to come up with a solution that will work well, that'll work really robustly. And I think that I've been thinking much more about robustness and fairness and like transparency in the last like 3-ish jobs more than anything else. So like Salesforce, Facebook, Intel, than I was thinking about when I was at InQtel and the other labs, because those were a little bit more proof of concept, but also because it wasn't at the forefront of my mind as much as it probably should have been. And then the other thing that I've had to learn too is to pause and think like, is this an okay project for us to do? Because often I get really excited, especially if it comes to a new problem or if it comes to new data. And sometimes I'll have to put on the brakes and be like, oh no, we really shouldn't be doing this problem. Let's try to restructure it, or let's, have a conversation about why this is problematic. So yeah, and I guess the other thing that has changed through the years is like sort of the amount I code, and a little bit is like a little bit of this is because I have been taking on more and more leading types of positions, which I love, and more of like the educational types of positions. So I end up talking to people a lot more than I end up like programming. But yeah, I'm always having to learn like new techniques or new languages. I definitely have like Scala on the list of things that I should learn more, because a lot of the people I work with now are using it and I only know basic Scala. But yeah, I don't know. It's like knowing how to learn is knowing how to go about solving a problem is definitely a constant and something that's I've always had to use.
Yeah, that sounds like a really fundamental skill to have. Yeah, and as also like the fact that you had to like sort of restructure problems that you really wanted to work on. Like I can't imagine like doing that. That seems like so challenging. So lots of respect for that.
Oh, thank you. No, and it's hard because like one example, I love talking about this example because it broke my heart a little bit that, we had to say no, is this student group came to us and they were trying to like trying to cull lionfish, this really invasive fish species from their non-native waters. And so they had like an underwater drone, like a UUV that was able to go around and, look for these types of fish. And so what they wanted to do was put that same technology that we were using out in the savannah to, find potential poachers and use it to find potential lionfish. And so I was like, oh, this is great. Like the lionfish, they're really bad. But the thing that like stopped it in the tracks and that we had to like restructure and talk about it and figure out like what are different solutions is that the group wanted to put like a harpoon on the drone so that when it saw the fish, it like killed the fish immediately. And yeah, that's definitely the most efficient because then you don't have to send divers, but now you have an autonomous weapon and that's like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good example.
Yeah. It's like great intention, good idea, just like needs work on the implementation. So
yeah, So looking back on, now at your career path, what advice would you give yourself regarding school or work, especially like advice for, like you might have for students like me and others?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like one of the things that I try to do and still fail to do is not, well, I think I've succeeded now, but is to not worry too much about like 5 or 10 year forecasts. Like it is like if that's part of like my style too. So some people that's what they thrive on, but like I I think I like was really super optimizing like all my choices in life
Mhm.
and being like, oh, should I do this or this or this? And like, writing pros and cons and just making an optimization out of it. And instead of that, like sort of going instead of trying to find the optimal right away, now I sort of have like a gradient ascent idea to life where it's like, okay, is this like, idea slightly better than, that last idea? It's like, yeah, okay, let's try that. So that's one thing. And then the second thing would be that like low hanging fruit are really good. A lot of times I have tried to like, maybe I'm a perfectionist. Wow, I'm seeing a theme in this. So like, yeah, there's a theme. Um, but like trying to figure out like the optimal design or like the best solution. And instead, like, especially if you're working on a production system, it's like, okay, well, is this idea like better than what we have in place today? And a lot of times, like going like a half step up instead of like that full step that you want to take can be really awesome because like it might be easier to implement. It might be easier for like the end users to understand, for them to action on it and, just sort of like get the ball rolling. So you get some forward momentum and that you're able to fix problems faster, basically. Um, yeah. So again, gradient ascent.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome advice. And I love the analogy. Um, yeah, no. Um, yeah, and sort of going off of that thread of, advice for students, how can we as users and students, as well as workers and citizens, sort of promote public debate around ethical use of AI within our social circles?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm probably preaching to some of the choir because they found you. So it's like, but finding resources for this is really, I feel like heartwarming to myself as well as like uh inspiring. It can be tough being in AI ethics because it's hard to like see the dumpster fires that are happening that can happen in like the AI world. You're like, oh gosh, we're never going to solve it. But then if you find like, oh, like this got fixed or these are good things that's going on, that can be super helpful because that, I don't know, that's inspired me to help like continue to go forward and to continue to fight for like ethical practices. I think in general too, like finding the good news out there is awesome. So like, I don't know, there's this newsletter I follow that's like called Future Crunch. And they're like just the positive news stories that you might not hear about. Because we hear about bad news all the time.
Yeah.
But and then like sharing the good news stories. So, instead of you know, always talking about, and it's not to like bury the things that are wrong and problematic. Those need to be talked about too.
Mhm.
And that can be tough too. Like, talk about things that failure cases. At NeurIPS this year, there was like this track workshop track called like, I still can't believe it doesn't work. I just loved. It was like, really great ideas that just don't work whatsoever. It's like, it was lovely. And then like the biggest piece of advice with regards to like AI ethics in particular too is to like figure out how you can embed it into your projects, no matter what they are. There's a really lovely toolkit that I think is great. It's called Deon, DEON, and it's created by Driven Data. And basically it's a checklist. And the reason that I love it so much is that this checklist goes through every single stage of a project lifestyle, from like when data consent to privacy to like data bias, trying to figure out model transparency, accountability. So it covers a lot of the AI ethics pillars, as well as like the AI lifecycle, or ML, or like data science, choose your buzzword. And it's really helpful. And it also asks the question of like, should this be done? And that's one of the biggest questions I think that, everyone should be asking, like, is this project okay, or is this sort of sketchy, and should we not go forward with it? And just encouraging each other, applauding each other, like when we say like, I'm not comfortable with this, because that's so hard to do.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that awesome resource, by the way. I'll link it in the video.
Awesome.
When it comes to, yeah, and definitely very powerful advice. So thank you so much for that. And I guess we're almost at the end of the interview. And one last question is, where can everyone find you or your work online?
Oh gosh. Where can people find me? So I don't know if I have like a Salesforce page, but I'm on Twitter. Twitter is the best. So I'm like data_Beth on Twitter. And if I find where my profile is on at Salesforce, I'll let y'all know.
Okay.
But yes.
All right. Perfect. Great. Thank you so much, Anna. It was a pleasure to talk to you today, and thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, you too, Mana. Thank you for all the great work that y'all are doing.
Thank you. This series is created by FairBytes. You can find more about FairBytes at fairbytes.org and follow @FairBytes on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook.